This is the same area where in the past 10 days we've seen thousands of protesters marching, calling for action, demanding change, and you can still see there are police officers keeping guard here at APD headquarters. You see the damage outside, guys. You saw just shattered glass everywhere. That does not compare to the inside. When you walked in, you saw, just glass everywhere. Obviously, a lot of the bottles missing from people just running in and taking whatever they could get their hands on.
Yeah, definitely.
For the past 40 minutes or so, folks have been dancing out here. The cumbia circle is what they're calling it. Obviously, the biggest question that a lot of folks have on their mind is this is estimated to cost around $10 billion. I know you guys say that federal funding dollars could cover up to almost half of that cost, but what about the rest, especially with the way the economy is looking right now?
What happens if voters don't approve it?
Officer Parker is not the only one taking a stand. Other Austin police officers are doing the same. Despite the scenes we saw this weekend with protesters out and about, shoulder to shoulder, this isn't going to be your typical meeting. This is going to be a virtual meeting, and that's because to this day, Austin is still under a stay-at-home order.
It was a very horrific experience.
That's how Nikki Carroll described her time downtown this weekend. She was just one of hundreds who were there to protest against police violence, but her cries for injustice quickly became tears of pain.
I wasn't one of the people who were going after the police or throwing stuff at them. I literally had my back to them and I was pushed and then dragged after that, and that was not okay.
That's why I and my colleagues are saying we need to have emergency meetings where we talk about the protests and talk about what people are asking for and talk about making sure that we make sure that folks were taking the appropriate action, because we don't want the police escalating these situations.
Over the weekend, police officers shot off less lethal rounds and released tear gas into crowds. Nikki says those images will last forever.
It's hard for me. It's hard for me to sleep at night after what happened to me.
She's one of dozens of demonstrators who were injured. Now she's calling on city leaders to take action.
Because I should have a right to protest and say what I have to say without being assaulted.
We are disappointed that the city has really reneged on its commitments that they made to us. And so at this point, we have had no other choice than to, in essence, fend for ourselves. But we're used to that.
Austin Latino Coalition member Paul Saldana says the city has tried to simply reach out in Spanish, but he says without a task force to guide them, they keep making mistakes.
It's important to note that our community is not monolithic. We have at least 25 subcultures of Latinos in Austin, so a simple Spanish translation isn't going to work. It has to be culturally relevant. We're not all Mexican-American or Mexican.
Austin public health leaders say they're still working on the task force and are offering resources until then. They hosted the first of several Facebook Live events this past Saturday for Spanish speakers.
And it really was an opportunity for us to hear from that community about the challenges as well as the successes, and where they would like Austin Public Health to go as we continue to plan the response.
Saldana says they can't wait. His community has an immediate need for resources and education. Latinos make up around 35% of the population, but account for 60% of positive COVID-19 cases.
A lot of folks in our Latino community have feel somewhat abandoned by the city.
Health leaders say the response to this pandemic is a marathon, not a sprint. But as we continue to see a spike in cases, Saldana says time is of the essence. And the next Austin Public Health conversation focusing on communities of color isn't until July 11th. Back to you. Lights off, doors shut. That's what bar goers will see if they swing by Whiskey Tango Foxtrot Ice House this weekend. It's one of the 4 bars TABC suspended liquor licenses for 30 days.
We felt extremely disappointed to find out when he left our bar at 12:08 a.m. and KXAN reported at 7:45 a.m. that our license was suspended. We were dumbfounded. We were like, how did they first find out before we did?
The bar's operations manager, Austin Talley, filed an appeal on Monday and is waiting on a hearing date. The agency has 10 days to set it up. Talley says he's confused as to why he received a violation after he claims an agent told him in person Friday night he was not in violation of COVID-19 guidelines. But TABC says that is not the case.
This operation involves undercover teams, and undercover teams do not make contact with business owners. Because this is a 30-day suspension as opposed to kind of a slap on the wrist, we want to be certain that we have the evidence that we need to show a true violation.
Then TABC officials say they'll contact the business the next day. Talley says the photos the TABC agent took at the entrance of the bar do not reflect what the crowd inside looked like that night, where he says social distancing was practiced.
We'll see how the hearing goes. You know, we don't want TABC to be crucified. Let's just have a partnership.
TABC says hearings are automatically granted for each business. Now, a judge can affirm, modify, or completely dismiss a suspension order. If a business owner or the agency do not agree with the ruling, they can appeal that decision to a state district court. Now, doing the math, Talley tells us if they have to remain closed for the next 30 days, that could cost them up to $500,000 in revenue. Back to you.